Hi, welcome to SPE Live and our show where we'll be talking to Total about their carbon journey in terms of reducing their carbon footprint. I am going to hand over to our host for today, Nigel Genby. So joining me here shortly is Nigel Genby. Nigel.
Thank you, Niels, very much. Welcome to the SPE Live and today's show, taking leadership and talking about Total's carbon footprint. It's great to be here with you. My name is Nigel Genvy. As Niels mentioned, it's a pleasure to be your host for today. I'm Global Head of Carbon Management at Gaffney Klein, a consultant and advisory company. Now, I've spent the vast majority of my career working for major IOCs in a variety of technical roles in exploration, development, and production, including resolving uncertainty and managing risks in issues such as scale and sand management. But in 2004, my career moved into carbon management. And this has given me the opportunity to also work on policy and commercial aspects in addition to technical. And I've worked on implementation of a wide variety of different greenhouse gas emission technologies in oil and gas, including flaring reduction, fugitive methane emissions management, energy efficiency improvements, integration of electrification and renewables, and really also my speciality, which is in carbon capture, use and storage. I've had the pleasure during this time and the honor to be the chair of industry technology collaborations, trade associations, and a number of roles for professional societies, including the SPE, such as the program chair for the CCUS technical section. In early 2009, I took up the position to work at Gaffney Klein to bring what I have learned to the service of the industry, as we believe that carbon management in oil and gas is key to continue to bring affordable, available, and environmentally sustainable energy to the world. So if you're new to the SPE Live format, check it out on social media on hashtag SPE Live, or find more on spe.org on the web. And special thanks, of course, has to go to the SPE Live format, which is in part made possible by sponsorship from the SPE Foundation. So firstly, a little bit of context and background about what we're going to be talking about today. Today, I've got the pleasure to be talking to Emmanuel Prade from Total on Total's efforts and leadership in our industry in reducing its carbon footprint. Before we start, though, it's important, I think, to recognize in these uncertain times that all credible future energy scenarios recognize that fossil fuels will remain a very important part of the total energy mix for the next several decades. Investment in upstream oil and gas projects is still needed in sustainable climate and energy system models, as production in the absence of any investment declines quicker than any plausible fall in global demand, barring, of course, what we've seen this year through temporary disruptions like COVID. The fact is that while technologies like wind and solar are making huge improvements in performance and cost, no other energy sources are available at the scales needed in the timeframes available to mid-century. Historically, energy transitions have taken 40 to 50 years and usually result in the addition rather than the subtraction of energy sources. There is, therefore, on the other side of the COVID pandemic, robust demand in oil and gas consumption, and continued investment in oil and gas is needed to prevent a mismatch in supply and demand. However, that said, there is an existential crisis developing, and no denying that the oil and gas industry faces significant financial, social, and political pressures that will likely continue to intensify. Over the past decade, climate-related shareholder resolutions, which commonly seek to improve disclosure or align the strategies of companies with a more sustainable pathway, have strongly increased. Following the Paris Agreement and the expectation of governmental policies to limit greenhouse gas emissions, investors have increased required rates of returns on equity for the industry. Moreover, an increasing number of banks, pension funds, insurance companies, and institutional and private investors are limiting their exposure to certain types of fossil fuel projects. The primary focus has been on coal, but some considerations are increasingly seen on some oil and gas project types as well. At the same time, there's a growing appetite and regulatory attention towards ESG or sustainable finance, supported by the advent of green labeled securities. Also, increased pressure for disclosures of climate-related risks, as under the recommendations from the Task Force for Climate-Related Financial Disclosures, TCFD. And in Europe, we've seen recently a taxonomy to guide capital allocation towards sustainable activities. Therefore, I think many now realize is that the oil and gas industry now faces a stark choice between working on achieving a smoother energy transition or entering a period of more competitive markets where the potential for market disruptions with large resource holders battling to gain more market share where there is still time to do so will prevail. The solution, risk management or carbon management, and putting in place steps to ensure that the type of oil and gas resources, how they are developed and how they are produced will have to change substantially. The role that oil and gas can play in the future of global energy is linked to its availability, affordability, and environmental benefits. So let's get into our discussion and meet my guest today. Joining me is Emmanuel Prade, Total's lead for carbon footprint reduction in Total E&P global operations. Emmanuel has been at Total for over 2 decades. His roles and wealth of experience span the full range of petroleum engineering activities and operations, from drilling, completion engineering, field development, EHS, to senior asset and operational management roles. He has global experience through about 10 overseas assignments, including Angola, Argentina, Qatar, Venezuela, and the UAE. And in 2019, Emmanuel moved to his current position in Paris, leading Total E&P's global footprint reduction efforts. This role is in line with Total's group commitment to reduce its direct Scope 1 and indirect Scope 2 greenhouse gas emissions from its operations from 46 million tons of CO2 equivalent per year in 2015 to less than 40 million tons of CO2 equivalent per year in 2025. So welcome, Emmanuel. So today we're going to discuss, for those that have just joined us, is how Total E&P is leading the industry on implementing technologies and operational practices across its global upstream portfolio to meet corporate goals for carbon and methane footprint reduction. We also discuss the expansion of Total's energy portfolio into wind and solar technologies. These activities are part of Total's longer sustainability journey and proactive commitments to environmental responsibility and their impact. To the audience via the social media chat, please send in your comments and questions to Emmanuel and in general about carbon management, and we'll bring those into our conversation that we're going to have over the next 40 minutes or so. So, Emmanuel, let's start. Where is Total today in the integration into your strategy and where of climate, and where do you want to be in, say, 10 years' time?
Hello, Nigel. Well, thanks for welcoming me at this SPE forum. I'm very honored to be here in order to, voice Total's ambition with respect to climate. I think to answer your question, first I should highlight that recently, the president of Total made his speech to the investors. It was actually on the 30th of September, so fairly recent. And if you watch it, you will realize that Total is really on the forefront of climate change. I mean, this has probably taken 50 or 60% of his speech to our investors. So that is to say how much climate matters to us. and how much activities we are carrying along on this important field. So talking about E&P very specifically, because that's where I belong in Total, E&P activities are making up for about 45% of the greenhouse gas emissions, Scope 1 and 2, for Total Group. So that is to say the upstream business is really representing a very fair share of the oil industry emissions, direct and indirect. So where do we stand at E&P? I would say we have tackled many of the low-hanging fruits, and we've been focusing on that in the not only in the recent years, but in the past 20 to 10 years, back, we already were very active. For example, on the flaring side, which is a big part of the wasted energy that we really want to cancel out, we have decreased our emissions very substantially. I mean, about 80% since 2010. So in 10 years' time, we have managed reducing our impact in flaring by 80%. So I think this is quite, self-demonstrating that we are very active on the matter. We also belong to we were the first subscriber to the Global Gas Flaring Reduction Initiative by the UN. We signed up in 2015, if I'm not wrong. And the ambition of all the subscribers is to cancel out any routine flaring by 2030. And I do believe we will be there before that date. So that's on the flaring, and we will keep our effort and the momentum going, definitely. Yeah.
Fair, that's excellent to hear. So it's great to hear that this has been a journey for well over a decade, Emmanuel, and you've really made a significant amount of reductions. I think definitely low-hanging fruit flaring is one of those. What about methane and methane reduction?
Well, today methane represents more or less 10% of our greenhouse gas emissions in CO2 equivalent, and I'm talking again about E&P business. And we can look at it in two ways. We can say, okay, 10% might not be the focus we want to address. But the other way, and that's our way, is that methane is the enemy, because it is the one thing to challenge for many reasons. The first reason being that, we are here to market our products. So why should we let our products escape from our processes? And that's a very good driver to eliminate any potential leaks. But another very strong driver definitely is acceptability. We cannot allow gas to be seeping to the atmosphere, whatever the reason might be. And I think this motto is very much adopted across the branches and across the oil and gas companies. And actually, we've been reducing methane emission in only 5 years by over 45%. So that tells you a lot about the efforts we currently undertake to eliminate methane. As we all realize, methane emissions are a difficult matter because they are very scattered in many cases. There is a big challenge also to monitor and measure the emissions as opposed to estimating them. So these are challenges that we address both on the operational side, but also on the R&D side. We develop drones with specific sensors, cameras, in order to have a continuous measurement on our methane emissions. We prohibit venting, of course, as a matter of designing our facilities. And there is a full array of actions that we've been undertaking. The latest one to demonstrate our commitment is to sign up the OGMP 2.0, which is the oil and gas methane partnership, which basically entails that all our operations by others are actually declaring in great details their methane emission and putting together methane reduction plans. So as you can see, we have a full array of actions, and we don't just let things happen. We want to be at the forefront of methane minimizing, basically.
Very good, because I think just yesterday we saw the European Commission announce some of the methane intensity goals that they are going to require for supply of natural gas into Europe. You on track to meet some of those intensity goals?
Yeah, well, that's a good question. Sorry, I forgot to mention this, but yes, we are on track. So on our oil and gas assets at large, our target is to have methane emission lower than 0.2% of our marketed gas. And we are on a very good track to get there. I believe we're almost there. And this is really a global effort as part of the OGCI. On the gas assets, our targets are even more stringent because we target less than 0.1% of methane emission compared to the marketed gas. So again, this is a very minimal, I would say, rate, and we want to go even beyond. And that's really on emissions, we have adopted a posture of continuous improvement. We know where we are. We measure where we are, and we want to get even further. I would also mention that it is a critical item to watch because the energy mix tomorrow, as far as Total sees it, will be more and more made of gas. And we want to be credible to the industry. We believe gas is a transition energy that will be necessary to basically fight the emissions caused by coal industry, for example. And we do believe that our mix will be electrons for sure, growing part of gas. And I would also say that we will still have some oil because liquids are also necessary to the mix until we find a suitable replacement for the long term.
Very good. Thank you. So there are definitely many options to avoid, reduce, replace, offset, sequester greenhouse gas emissions from oil and gas. Those low-hanging fruits, nicely actually identified in International Energy Agency report that was released at the beginning of this year about oil and gas in energy transitions. It identified about approximately 40 to 50% of all methane emissions can be avoided at no net cost. Great to hear that you're well on the pathway and to achieve some of these now standards that are coming through from governments around methane emissions to secure the future role that gas has in the energy transition. The other low-hanging fruit, Manuel, is energy efficiency. The IEA report has said that 10% of energy use can be reduced by applying energy efficiency at low or no net cost. What have you seen around energy efficiency deployment?
Well, energy efficiency is by no means a low-hanging fruit. It takes some engineering, it takes some reflection in order to curb the emissions related to energy spent through turbines. For example, you do need technology, you do need specific actions on green fields rather than, brown fields. So, but however, we've been very successful by reducing our improving our energy efficiency by 1% per year since year 2015. So again, that's a good demonstrator of the focus we put in reducing emissions. 10% is probably something we can achieve. I have no doubt about it. Today, we can see that in E&P, we have over 50% of the emissions being related to power generation offshore or onshore. And we do see a great opportunity, of course, to reduce our GHG emission by working on energy efficiency, improving the processes. That can be done in many ways and takes a lot of engineering focus, but also very sound operational practices by running less turbines for the same facility, by improving or carrying out pitch analysis on, I would say, exchangers, for example, by electrifying our designs. There are plenty of possibilities out there, and we are just starting, actually, this journey to reduce our consumption of or self-consumption of energy when producing oil and gas.
Very good. So I guess that brings us nicely then, Manuel, into really what has worked well and what has not worked so well in reducing greenhouse gas emissions from oil and gas operations. It sounded like from the energy efficiency answer that there's a lot of opportunity to work with service companies in the deployment in the new technology. What have you seen around those aspects?
Okay, well, I mean, what has been working well for Total, at least, is first I would say the management drive has been a strong driver to push for continuous improvement, continuous reduction. Enhancing the culture of the personnel is something very significant when time comes to reduce emissions. As long as you have people on your facilities that are not made aware of the importance of saving fuel gas, of reducing emissions, doesn't really matter how well you design your facilities. People won't use them at their best. So I think one of the first focus, and that has worked very well for E&P in Total, is to make people aware and aligned behind this great objective of reducing our impact in terms of emission. What has worked well as well, I would think, is to work along with R&D, working with research and development. Sometimes you need a strong push to get from a technological status where there is a technology available only in the books or on paper, and you need to, by the time you want to bring it on board on a specific development, it takes a lot of effort and commitment. I think in Total, we've been quite good at bringing up those new technologies on board our facilities, especially on the deep water side, where we have, fully electrical compressors, for example. We have closed flare systems. Bringing technology, having the courage to implement them on key developments definitely has worked for us. And we do see a difference between more recent designs compared to prior designs. Of course, our contractors have played a very key role in this adventure, I would say, because they have given us the confidence that we can actually use those techniques and that they are qualified for implementation. So this has worked, I would say, quite well. What has not worked well? It's a tricky question because you always know what worked, and what didn't work you tend to forget about, of course. I think we need to be better at closing those gaps with technology. We need to speed up technology. We need to show even more courage in implementing the new techniques. It's really not always easy because you make strong economical decision. There are big stakes out there, and you want to make sure that whatever you put on the vessel will work. So there is a fine balance to exercise between putting new technology and making sure it will work. I think we want to be a bit bolder in the future if we want to go to the next level. That probably can be improved. Also, I think we could have been more successful if we had been implementing higher standards in all the regions of the world. Of course, there are, and you were quoting Europe, and the North Sea especially is a very high standard area where you do see high efficiencies, you see very low flaring, and there are very good reasons for that, one of them being the legal framework. Now, if you, as an operator, are able to embark host countries in those new and more stringent legal frameworks, for sure, you are able to apply across the world the single standards where you will generate less emissions. So I think we have a duty as an operator to bring about those new standards elsewhere, thinking, for example, West Africa, and that will give us definitely some success. We need to work together with other operators to achieve that goal. So I think more communication, more alignment with all operators will be key to achieving that purpose.
Excellent points, Manuel. So I think, definitely technical and technology, working with service companies, you mentioned, and integrating those into your operations systematically. But then it's also the softer issues, let's say, but actually really quite hard ones around, cultural engagement, the regulations and legal aspects, of course, and then collaboration in joint ventures, etc., to get them to accept as well some of the direction that you're taking. Some very challenging, soft, I would say, sort of issues to work around some of the technical. Thank you. I think in technology, perhaps one of the areas dear to my heart, carbon capture, use and storage. There's a few questions that are coming in, Emmanuel, about CCUS, and I know Total, are very involved in a number of CCUS projects. Could you give us a few indications of those, what they are, and whether they're playing into your Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, or really whether it's around your end use emissions?
Oh, well, that's an interesting question. Yes, Total is engaged into the CCUS technology from first and foremost from a R&D standpoint. We have quite a lot of investment looking at capture, looking at downhole injection. So there is a fair amount of budget dedicated and devoted to CCUS technologies. So I think this is a very good sign of us being able to progress towards making or taking the opportunity of CCUS across the world, because where CCUS stands for us, it's a way to a key way to access to neutrality. There is only so many things you can do to cancel your Scope 1 and 2, but at the end of the day, you also want to be able to address Scope 3. And CCUS and carbon sinks in general are required to achieve that purpose. So you're right by saying that we are fully vested into CCUS. For example, we are a partner in Northern Lights, just to quote this one. We are very active. We have some people detached to this venture. So we keep a very close eye on the progress done by Northern Lights and other projects, obviously. So yes, we do believe it's a key area. We have also in E&P, we are structuring ourselves. I mean, one of the questions that people ask themselves, being part of E&P, is basically in that panorama, what is my future? How will my competencies will be worthwhile? And we do believe that E&P competencies are required in many fields to accompany this transition, CCUS being one of them. If you talk CCUS, very necessarily, you need to address downhole issues. Is the formation able to withstand the presence of CO2? Are you able to inject in, I would say, old wells? What will be the flow regime? What will be the pressure loss, the flow assurance issue? All these are thematics belonging to E&P. So what I do like about CCUS is that it takes away part of your scope and emissions, but it also is using the resources and the human capital you already have built over the years in the E&P industry. So I think this is really something that SPE should be interested upon, and where we can bring value as E&P.
Very good point. I think I believe the majority of CCUS operations today, capturing nearly 40 million tons of CO2 per annum. The majority of those are actually Scope 1 and Scope 2 emissions, gas processing, and also hydrogen production, and of course taking CO2 across into to utilization and enhanced oil recovery. There's been a question about is there any plans or projects for decarbonisation and sequestration regionally outside of Europe? What is Total doing outside of Europe? We heard about Northern Lights. Any other plans and projects active today?
Yeah, well, I mean, we are okay. I can answer in many ways, but I mean, talking about studies or projects which have not yet come up, I can share with you that, for example, in the UAE, we are a very strong partner of ADNOC, and there is a big reflection. There is a pilot ongoing on CCUS in one of the fields where we are actually partners for EOR purposes. And we are working along with ADNOC in order to take benefit of the depleted reservoir, but also on the CO2, industrial CO2, be it on the steel manufacturing aspect, for example, or native CO2 in order to re-inject it. So that's one example on which we are very active. Another one on which we are operator actually is Mozambique Lng, which is a new prospect for us. The phase 2 is the emissions are something we want really to do our best effort to minimize and cancel if we can. And one of the possibilities is to inject CO2, the anthropogenic CO2, into the aquifers. So there is a very detailed regional study ongoing in order to assess this possibility. And of course, we want to bring about this possibility at the lowest possible cost. I think this is going well. It's still on the draw board. You know, it's not really active yet, but it's just preparing for the future, actually.
Yeah, very important. Preparing for the future, designing in, looking at options for sure around reducing greenhouse gas emissions at scale. Great to hear that that you're continuing to do that. You also mentioned in your answer as well, I think some of the other transferable skills into CCUS that members of the Society of Petroleum Engineers and subsurface professionals in general really can do, and of course definitely translation to CCUS. What about some of the other energy transition technologies? What other opportunities do you think there are for some of the people today that are listening to our conversation?
Well, I mean, talking about E&P, one of the things we did not mention was the possibility to electrify our plants. And it's a challenge, but whenever we are onshore, for example, you can combine renewable with E&P activities. For example, having a PV plant connected to the grid and having your upstream facility connected to the grid, you can actually offset your scope 1 and 2 emissions in a very direct and visible manner. So I would think you can see where E&P and renewable can marry together and combine and, you know, emphasize each other or serve each other. And I think this is good news, you know, introducing new technologies, new ways of producing energy with, I would say, older or more traditional ways to produce oil and gas. I think this is one of the areas where everyone is very interested to embark on and to participate into. So I think this is a fantastic opportunity for us to basically get on board the new energies and accompany the energy transition. In total, we plan to have an energy mix by 2030 with about 15% of electrons. Well, if those electrons can serve to power our E&P sites, that would be the best, you know, to start with. So that's one of the areas where we do see a potential. Other renewable type for us is floating wind farms. We do know that there will be a great expansion in this type of renewable application for the simple reason, you know, that wind farms onshore, there are already so many. We do see some resistance from the public. So we do, and we would like to think that our experience in semi-sub or floating structures will serve the floating wind farms market. So we are very much willing to contribute. And this is also an area where E&P is getting organized because we have so many structural engineers, we have so many links with very competent contractors that can do offshore works, that we do think we have an advantage. The oil and gas industry has an advantage compared to other industries in that precise field.
Great, thanks. So definitely, I think some new technologies and linking back to CCUS, I heard just yesterday that the Northern Lights project that you're involved with in the North Sea is partnering with Microsoft to incorporate their digital, of course, solutions into that project. That's a very exciting, of course, I think, partnership and collaboration that you're working on there into CCUS as an area. So very exciting. I think what the other question I want to move into, we've had some audience questions around this too, is what role can the SPE and its members play in accelerating greenhouse gas emission reductions in oil and gas operations? And in particular, the question from the audience has been, really, how do we engage with other stakeholders outside of our industry as in what we're doing, all of the good news that we're actually bringing and achieving? How do we actually get that heard and understood by other stakeholders?
You mean stakeholders outside the oil and gas industry?
Yes, yeah, customers, basically customers.
Yeah, well, I mean, one simple way to answer is that Total nowadays we consider ourselves as a multi-energy company. We don't only do oil and gas, we also have many clients to whom we sell energy products, electricity. So, we have plenty clients nowadays that are absolutely not related to the oil and gas business. Well, we need to understand the expectations of such clients. And actually many of them, they look at two things. They look at being able to understand where the electrons come from. So in Total, we are very clear about the origin of the electricity. And actually, we give the opportunity to all our clients to have basically only green electrons if they so wish. We also have the ambition to provide energy at a low cost, because we believe it's a right, it's an entitlement, it shouldn't be a luxury access, let's say. So at Total, we have this duty to basically listen to our clients. We are looking at being an energy company. We are not only an oil and gas company, even though that's the way we started. It's obviously not the only facet of our business today.
Very good. And yeah, that's please remember in the audience as well, please share your thoughts on what you're hearing, and I'll pose those, of course, over to Emmanuel. So great opportunity. So let's see again if we can pick up some of those comments that we've had in already. There's a question here about getting back to methane emissions. And what is Total's plan to inform the population and consumers about reducing the methane emissions?
Okay, well, that's a good question. I mean, thank you, Karen. Well, I mean, the simple way to answer is that we have a website which is public on Total, where we actually publicize all our emissions. So we do have a climate report which details, what is the contribution in terms of CO2, what it is in terms of methane, the origin and the source of each of the emission. So that's the way we make our information public and to show we are transparent. So I really invite you to go to our website and find out. It's quite easy to scroll with. Also, we do participate to multiple conferences. Last week I participated to the French Gas Association, and the question was exactly that. What do you plan to do to reduce your methane emission? And it's our great interest to demonstrate what we do, because we think we are very good at what we do as an industry. We want to publicize it, demonstrate it, and all those conferences are actually public, and all the figures are publicly provided. OGMP 2.0, which is the latest initiative to which our CEO subscribed, aims at asking the same to the association or the ventures in which we are not the operator. So we want to build more transparency to the public and convince that we do the right thing.
Very good. Yeah, thank you. And so let's get back to technology, I think, as well, and sharing best practices around the industry. Could we do more on that? What are some of the forums that we can really share what you've learned, what Total's learned, what the other companies have learned? Is there one for the industry today? Is there a trade association, or is it really the role of professional societies like the SPE in order to do that?
Well, I mean, yes, definitely SPE is a key forum for E&P exploration and production activities. It's really what I like about SPE is it's very engineering focused, and reducing emissions is not just a matter of willing to do so. It's also a matter of bringing competencies around this issue, because engineering will bring solutions. So SPE definitely is a forum that I value in order to exchange and reach technologies which are enablers to reducing further emissions. Now, we have plenty other forums which are around. For example, the IOGP, which is Oil and Gas Producers Association, which is very active. The OGCI, which is the Oil and Gas Climate Initiatives, which gathers 13 operators and which addresses, I think, 30% of the worldwide emissions or production, rather, sorry. And all these are open forums. They have open websites. You can scroll through and find out about oil and gas companies, how we tackle the challenge of climate, each and every one of us. So I think there are plenty forums out there, which all of them have value. We, as Total, we all participate to all of them, and it takes great effort, but it also brings tremendous value to our understanding of what others do and trying to club together to duplicate efforts, basically.
Yeah, definitely. I think replicating best practices, around the whole industry definitely is something that we can now do. There's enough evidence, and as you said, there's some really good conduits and avenues like the SPE that we've got. That's actually a good plug. That's somewhat selfish of me, because next year in July we'll be having a decarbonisation section of the JPT. So Emmanuel, I'll come back and we'll ask you in Q1 to contribute some of Total's experiences to that, and we can then share that as well. Use that medium as well to share around the industry. I think in terms, one more question. And perhaps one of the biggest questions around decarbonisation, and that's the business case. A question from the audience I'll tie into this. Is Total considering a carbon price as a strategy to reduce your carbon footprint?
Well, another very good question, and a tough one. Yeah, definitely carbon pricing, helps. Because, I mean, you said it before, Nigel, I mean, you can do some CO2 abatement at no cost. And this is what we call the low-hanging fruit. And this is what we want to tackle first. However, the ambition of Europe, for example, is to go faster, is to cancel out emissions. And for this, you need strong enablers. One of them in Europe is definitely the cost of CO2. The carbon pricing is a catalyzer, a catalyst, and it has been instrumental in driving some changes. You take the Norwegian industry, offshore industry for nowadays, is quite exemplary. The UK North oil and gas industry is getting there as well. Germany as well. So yes, we do use carbon pricing as a leverage or a lever. Internally, we also decided, our CEO has actually decided to put a carbon price even in countries where it doesn't exist, West Africa, for example. So we nowadays, and this is public value, I mean, I can say it without any secret, is $40 a ton is being used in all the economical calculation we perform. And we'll see whether that allows us to do some further investment. And from 2030, it will actually be $100 per ton of CO2. So the answer is yes, we account for a pricing when it exists. And even when it doesn't exist internally, we assume a carbon price in order to fuel further investments.
Very good. I mean, I think it's critical, right? If you want to get systematic like Total is around its portfolio, having a clear price signal like that on emissions in order to inform your decisions and manage the risk, really is the ultimate solution. So, and then of course the rest of the organization can engage and look at technologies and indeed look at implementing some of those low-hanging fruit and even not so low-hanging fruit with some of those prices. So excellent, very good. I think that's a key takeaway for hopefully companies that are listening, and also of course for SPE members that have been listening in. I think we've heard today from Emmanuel some great examples of technologies, of options that you can also take and look at within for your company that you're working, and the assets that you're working on, projects that you're working on. So take some of those ideas and the resources that Emmanuel's mentioned. Go to One Patrol and look at some of the technical papers written by SPE members. There's a plethora of great information there for you to draw upon. So in close, thank you so much, Emmanuel, for your time today. It's been a real pleasure to discuss this topic with you and learn about what Total is achieving. I think we really need to see more leadership and ownership of carbon management, really to ensure the success of our industry going forward. Thank you also to the audience for watching. I think find more SPE Lives on by going into social media with the hashtag SPE Live, or go to the website spe.org. And of course, check out ATCE. I'm involved in a special session on CCUS at ATCE, so a little extra plug in there. Check that out as well. Lastly, thanks to the SPE Foundation, and SPE Live is made indeed in part possible by the sponsorship from the SPE Foundation. Thank you very much, everybody, for your time today.
Thank you, Nigel.